Straight to Ed, though, our economics editor, of course. That breaking news, Ed, what's it looking like?
We've just had the inflation numbers through for April. It is 2.3% is the inflation rate in April. Those numbers just through from the Office for National Statistics, down sharply from 3.2% in March. However, Kay, not down as much as economists had been expected. The Bank of England actually thought that CPI inflation, remember, we're just talking about the rate at which prices are rising or indeed falling each year. That's the rate of inflation that we tend to look at. The Bank of England had thought that it might come down to 2%, which is that's its target, so it's duty bound to try and keep that. That is very much normal. The fact that it's come down to 2.3%, well, there's some good news in that it's much lower than it has been for some time, and many will look at this and say, well, good, this is kind of an end to the period of abnormality where inflation was way off the Bank of England's target. But the fact that it hasn't come down quite as much as economists, including the Bank of England, were expecting, that does perhaps suggest that the bank may not cut interest rates quite as soon as some people had thought. There have been a lot of people out there thinking maybe they're going to cut interest rates down from their level where they are right now, 5.25%, as soon as next month, so June. This, to me, suggests that maybe they may hold on for a little bit longer, maybe wait till August, but it really depends on what happens with these numbers. But as I say, that's the big figure that we've just had in. I'm looking at it on my screen at the moment. Inflation down from 3.2% to 2.3% in April. A big fall, largely down to what's happening with energy prices. So they are much higher than they were a few years ago, but actually compared with last year, they're a little bit lower, and that is pulling down on inflation. And as a result of that, that rate, that very closely watched rate of how fast prices are changing in the economy, down to the lowest level basically since the beginning of this cost of living crisis.
How will the government spin this when we speak to the Chancellor in the next hour?
Well, I imagine they'll be very happy that it is down close to what might be considered a normal level. So 2.3%, it's not far off the Bank of England's target. It's as low as it's been for some years, the lowest since the beginning of this period of high inflation. So I imagine they'll be keen to emphasise that. I imagine they'll be keen to emphasise the fact that you've got the UK out of recession now, formally, according to the numbers we had a couple of weeks ago. We talked to the Prime Minister and the Chancellor about that as well. So they want to present this as a period of the UK going back to something resembling normality. And obviously they're doing that ahead of the election. They want people to feel like they're getting better off. I think the real question, Kay, I mean, aside from, there's all sorts of policy questions that I imagine you'll ask him, but aside from all of that is, do people feel better off now than they were a few years ago? And I think the reality is no, because when you look at inflation, we're talking just now, that 2.3% number, it's great news that it's no longer rising at double-digit rates, which it was before, but nonetheless, we are still paying much more, about kind of 20% more today than we were a couple of years ago. And it's that jolt where we're going, you know, where we're going from in the past to where we are now. That's what I think a lot of people are feeling when you go out for shopping, when you look at your bills every month. So the fact that it's down to 2.3%, it will be a relief, and doubtless the Chancellor will want to focus on that. The fact that it's not an end to what people are experiencing, that's perhaps more significant. And then finally, that other point, you know, for economists, they'll be looking at this and going, oh, is it down quite low enough for the Bank of England to start cutting interest rates? Not quite sure.